they show this linear graph of Bitcoin, and they basically are claiming that's like a boom and bust cycle, that it doesn't have any real life and real use case potential. Look at a logarithmic scale. You can actually see that Bitcoin long-term actually gains value. For instance, if you look at Ethereum, 70% of the Ethereum nodes are actually worldwide run on hosted services. So that means that they are run in cloud services belonging to hyperscaler companies. So companies that we know, such as Amazon, Google, and the other big ones who are very important with their data centers. Well, I guess that you understand that that might be a little bit paradoxical, right? For a system or an ecosystem that is all about decentralization. But if then you look at the underlying fundamental infrastructure where the blockchain is hosted, it's located in the cloud of a centralized server belonging to a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company. Although mining is currently still not allowed in China, actually the graphs show that China is involved with Bitcoin mining currently, and actually it accounts for more than 20% of all the Bitcoin mining globally is still occurring in China.
Hey guys, Alessio, hope you're well. Today we're actually quite honored, and a very special video here today. We're joined with business development strategist in Florence in Italy, and that's Alexandra Overgaag, pronounced correctly in Dutch, I believe, as Alexandra Overgaag, maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway, Alexandra has done us a huge favor to be here in this video because she's done some great research into crypto and into Bitcoin, blockchain, adoption of Bitcoin, and many other subjects. We'll try and keep the subject brief. Alexandra, how are you doing? You well?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me here today with you. It's a great pleasure and honor. Thank you.
Great. Now, pleasure's all mine. So Alexandra, listen, let's start with some of the things you found out in your research about crypto and Bitcoin and blockchain. But you mentioned something that there's a misconception apparently with people and probably the media. What's the misconception that you were telling me about?
In general, I would say that there's a bunch of misconceptions living in mainstream media and even amongst people who don't work in the sector. I would like to point out that I work in the sector since last year. I'm no expert such as some other people, but I do have gained quite a lot of knowledge about how everything works, also being a trader in crypto since a couple of years. So a misconception that I often see in the media is, even in Dutch media, sometimes they're speaking about they show this linear graph of Bitcoin, and they basically are claiming that's like a boom and bust cycle, that it doesn't have any real life and real use case potential, that the volatility is absolutely high and outrageous, and that it's just a dangerous thing. And moreover, that's when they're speaking about crypto, they always speak about Bitcoin. They don't speak about the underlying technology, such as blockchain or the whole Web3 sector that I'm working in myself. It's always about Bitcoin. And in terms of this linear chart that I often notice that is being compared to like tulip manias of hundreds of years ago, look at a logarithmic scale. You can actually see that Bitcoin long-term actually gains value as an absolutely deflationary mechanism. So I do think that is a first thing that has often been misconceptualized overall, and then there's other things I've
Just going back to what you're saying, Alexandra. So in a sense, you're saying that there's almost a kind of a bias or prejudice which the mainstream media, most media has, and it's derogatory, isn't it? It's kind of negative towards Bitcoin. Am I right? So it's like. Is it because they view it as something dangerous and perhaps inferior in a way? They don't look at the advantages of Bitcoin. They only focus on the risky or the scary part of the crypto or Bitcoin world.
Yes,
that's right.
I would even say that sometimes they even ridicule it, like blockchain and Bitcoin mostly as a whole sector, which is a shame because it offers so much real life potential for every one of us in terms of financial inclusion, a whole blockchain sector, which I would really like to underline is that there are great things happening in blockchain and Web3, right? And of course, Bitcoin is only one crypto asset. It's a fundamentally important one. But all the attention in the media, and then only in bad times, right? Only during a correction or a lot of intraday volatility, then suddenly this topic pops up on the agenda of talk shows again. So that is something that personally kind of bothers me. And also the fact that it's always men that then talk about it. There's never a woman on the table.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
I have to
shame.
admit, the majority of people who watch my show from the analytics seem to be male as well. Now, I'm not quite sure why that is. I mean, I'd love the fact to see more females like yourself, again, engaged in crypto and Bitcoin. Tell me, what is this? What would you say are some of the things they should be saying then? What are some of the important things you found out that they should be telling people? I know you mentioned a few already, but tell us some more.
No, something else I would like to mention is that, again, this focus on Bitcoin and crypto being used for illegal and criminal activity, that is something that might have been true in the past, but currently it's not that heavily used. A very important report came out recently showing crypto crime, and only less than 1% of all the transaction volumes relating to crypto is actually for illicit and criminal purposes. So it's not that everyone is using crypto for bad things. It's not that everyone is just laundering money and, you know, moving drugs or buying stuff on the dark net. That's absolutely not the case. So that is something that I would like to point out as well. I do think that we have to, you know, make a good distinction between the blockchain fundamentally being open and transparent, meaning that everyone can see which transactions are occurring on the blockchain, and that is completely transparent, right? That is one of the great things that of blockchain per se. Another thing is, of course, identity, because there are ways to actually figure out whose identity is behind a certain transaction. If you follow these traces, there are companies that are actually very good at that, but that is not necessarily always the case that you can easily see it or not. But there are profound and very interesting ways to actually follow these traces and figure out who it is. But I would say that that is not standardly the case. Let's also not forget that, you know, if we speak about blockchain, crypto, and then compare it to the current status quo of the financial system, there's always also some things that are not completely, let's say, working perfectly, right, in the current financial and economical global system. Think about a World Bank report just showed that globally 1.7 billion people are unbanked, meaning that they don't have access to banks leaving their funds just in their pockets. Well, actually 1 billion of those people do have mobile phones. So the world towards crypto can be opened for them, and they may actually enjoy financial inclusion through crypto. Another thing, of course, is inflation. And I do think that crypto and blockchain is an important hedge against inflation. Not always short term, but on the long run, yes, definitely.
So Alexandra, let's go to the second subject. I think you've done also some interesting, you found something also interesting about BTC, the blockchain of Bitcoin. There's a lot of push nowadays to regulate Bitcoin and all that. So what are some of the things you found out about that you can tell us about?
Yeah, in terms of Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin having a fundamentally bad impact on the environment, I would say that it's also one of those discourses that we always find not only on television but also on your birthday party, right, with your family. Yeah, Bitcoin is so bad for the environment, therefore I'm just reluctant to get in, right? I would say if you do a little bit more research and if you look in Bitcoin and the importance of Bitcoin, first of all, for the whole blockchain and crypto ecosystem, you may find that actually the proof of work mechanism that underlines the whole functioning of Bitcoin. I won't go into the technicalities, but I will just say that it's extremely important for the security of the whole system. And we all know if a system is not secure, if actually it's vulnerable to hacking or hostile takeovers, it's basically very dangerous and worthless, right? And it can create massive financial risks. So let me say that the whole Bitcoin proof of work miner is actually very important for the security. Then if you look a little bit further on and you compare the impacts, the so-called negative impact of Bitcoin in terms of total energy globally, you actually see that it's only a very, very small part of energy being used globally is going towards Bitcoin mining. Of course, it's not always super easy to establish that, but there is very interesting and profound research on that. And furthermore, I would also like to point out that even if Bitcoin uses a considerable amount of energy in terms of mining, let's also look where this energy is coming from, right? What is the resource behind the energy? Because research shows that actually, I believe 56% of the energy used for Bitcoin mining is actually coming from sustainable resources globally. So that is quite significant, in my opinion.
There's a lot of there's a lot of pushback on Bitcoin saying we should regulate it. I've heard this recently with Terra Luna. So, you know, with the collapse in Luna and all that, a lot of people are saying now, well, that's why we should regulate crypto and Bitcoin. Want to know what you think about that? Have you found anything on that? Are there any flaws in this argument, or do you think they're right?
You know, the European Union was recently looking to ban Bitcoin mining, and eventually they were voting against it. It was quite narrow. But what I will say is that there's actually a case study that is China banning crypto mining last year and actually prohibiting crypto in that country. And I've actually found two very, very interesting charts that show what happens when China did that. So initially, the hashing power is called, basically the power of the system fell rapidly, right? It collapsed to a certain extent, not Bitcoin itself, but just the mining that occurred in China. There are graphs that show that very clearly. But it caught up over time. There were other countries taking over the mining power. So the system remained stable and in place. Then very interesting, what I thought is that although mining is currently still not allowed in China, actually the graphs show that China is involved with Bitcoin mining currently, and actually it accounts for more than 20% of all the Bitcoin mining globally is still occurring in China. So what I want to say is that even if you ban Bitcoin mining, in this case in China, it still occurs. So I do wonder to which extent it can be stopped, even if you heavily regulate it. Let me also say that I'm not...
So you say it cannot be stopped or can be stopped?
Actually, I think fundamentally that it cannot be stopped, just because if you regulate it, they however find ways to do it, because it's such an important system and it's such an important creator of wealth, not only for financial wealth, but also for financial inclusion and so on. And also, secondly, can regulators and should regulators really regulate Bitcoin and the whole industry? I understand that they might want to, but then this whole debate comes in terms of innovation versus do you have to regulate things, yes or not? Are regulators even in time? Should potential regulation not be based on interaction between different members of society, including regulators, including industry specialists, including even blockchain specialists themselves? So I do, again, coming from law and political science, I understand that maybe regulators want to regulate it, but I also think that fundamentally many of their negative assumptions are actually misconceptions and that they shouldn't. Certainly, again, the whole fact that Bitcoin mining is so important for the security of the system, the very fact that the system is standing very, very firmly and therefore is keeping a whole ecosystem in place and is the king, basically, right? They always say Bitcoin is the king of the ecosystem. The very fact that Bitcoin is so stable and important, I would say it would be absolutely not a good idea to just regulate it all over the place and even ban it. So I would like to say that. So
actually, you're saying that your research shows that regulation is not a good strategy.
Well, some of my research shows that, and my personal opinion shows that as well. And I can say very firmly that I really fundamentally believe that it shouldn't be banned or too heavily regulated, because it's such an important part of the whole ecosystem of blockchain, of the underlying.
That's very interesting.
I found a very interesting chart online that showed that VC capital has year to year has been spurred by 700%. So basically, a $25 billion amount just flew into blockchain technology last year. And that wouldn't go there if it was a sector of boom and bust, right? Of bubbles only. There is money going there.
And so a lot of probably institutional money, big money.
Yes, and institutional money as well. Of course, VC is private capital, but then if you look at institutions, you only have to look at the news websites, right? More and more institutions, such as banks or even pension funds, are actually offering crypto or blockchain related products and services to their customers. And what that indicates is, in my opinion, that they're is a structural growth of the sector, because institutions, they don't jump in overnight. Usually they have a long-term horizon and they are slightly more cautious than other types of capital. So the very fact that they are jumping in means that this is actually something that is important and that they see as a future sector of interest. And yeah, I hope that spurs truth and also trust in the sector.
Okay, Alexandra, I'd like to talk about the next subject, just decentralization, or indeed the decentralization cloud. So let's talk about that. It seems that, I mean, in your report, you said that blockchain is decentralized, but investors should ideally study the infrastructure as well. So what are the things that you think that people should pay attention to when it comes to the decentralization issue?
Yeah, I think this is actually an issue that is slightly, you know, underperceived overall. It's I will explain to you very, very briefly why I think that, what is the problem and why I think it is a problem. So as I said before, the fundamental part of blockchain is that it's decentralized. Again, that no single individual or company has power over the blockchain as a technology, just to make sure that the system functions and that no one takes over, right? So a fundamental thing is that we have observed is that, okay, a blockchain can be decentralized, but look at the underlying structure. So if you have different parts that make up the blockchain, right? Blockchain is a decentralized system, meaning that lots of different nodes, we call it like that, are working together to make the system run. But ultimately, I'm sure that you know that today, a lot of our, let's say, databases, we don't have a database here next to our computer, right? We connect to a cloud. I'm sure that many of the audience can relate to that, that we don't have giant databases in our living room, but we connect often to a cloud. Well, the same goes for people running a part of a blockchain and whole blockchain companies sometimes. So they have their underlying infrastructure located in the cloud. And why is that a problem? Well, that shouldn't necessarily be a problem, but the issue is that, for instance, if you look at Ethereum, 70% of the Ethereum nodes are actually worldwide run on hosted services. So that means that they are run in cloud services belonging to hyperscaler companies. So companies that we know, such as Amazon, Google, and the other big ones who are very important with their data centers, they're located there. And a lot of them are actually located in the Amazon centers. Well, I guess that you understand that that might be a little bit paradoxical, right? For a system that's, or an ecosystem that is all about decentralization, but if then you look at the underlying fundamental infrastructure where the blockchain is hosted, it's located in the cloud of a centralized server belonging to a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company. And why is that a problem? Well, because sometimes big parts of a decentralized blockchain are even located in one single data center. So there is one case in 2021 of a big layer 1 blockchain. I won't mention the name because that's not very friendly, but basically almost 40% of the whole blockchain was being run from one data center of Amazon. So that means that if Amazon either had a problem in its infrastructure, or because there was some, I don't know, an electricity, you know, outage or whatsoever, it could potentially be a kill stake in the whole blockchain, because it has to keep running, right? It has to be keep running by the majority of nodes. So that's a bit dangerous. And apart from these dangerous and ideological problems that decentralization of the blockchain versus centralization of where the nodes are hosted bring us, it can also bring financial problems, in the sense that if then you cope with an outage, you can have lawsuits, you can have financial claims, you can have a whole network's reputation being damaged. There's lots of problems going out there. And a final point that I would like to say is that I have observed in my research is that globally 75% of all the clouds that we use, right, all the data centers that run the clouds are actually belonging to the 5 big companies that we all know. You know, the big 5 hyperscalers, including Amazon, Google, and so on. So they are basically having some sort of a monopoly, oligopoly, and they actually have very, very high profit margins.
Yeah.
And companies, not only you and me, but also Web3 companies or any other startup, are actually paying quite a lot of money for all these big profit margins. So I believe personally that this is type of a market failure, or at least a market inefficiency, where new solutions should come in and actually should try to solve this whole monopoly and the very fact that Web3 companies have to use decentralized services, because that's a very big paradox.
Interesting. Thank you so much indeed, Alexandra.
God, I'm so warm. It's like 30 degrees here, and I'm sitting with this.
Oh, really? Is that hot?
Yeah, it's really warm because I don't have air conditioning, so I'm sorry for that.
I'm so sorry. Any last words? Any final words?
If I may say, my company is just opening up a new investment round, and we are actually also actively building up some community efforts. So if you are interested in learning more about really solid and real life use case potential blockchain project, just figure out what is Radom Network, and I would love to speak more with you about it and explain what we're doing.
How do you say Freedom Network?
Radom Network, Radom.
Oh,
but like
Radom Network.
Radom without, random without an M, we sometimes say. And we're just restructuring the whole company, the company website, and lots of other materials, but we're rapidly expanding.
Tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
Well, basically, it's also a bit maybe complicated to say, but we are a Web3 payment infrastructure and authentication protocol for cloud, IoT, and big data. And that means basically that we're not only building an asset management platform, completely decentralized, but fundamentally also a marketplace. And a really interesting thing about that is that if you have any type of asset that you can connect to the internet, that can be a crypto mining rig, indeed, there is the mining again, or a database or whatever, you can lease out access through our platform to people globally. So if you want to access a mining rig, sometimes you can do that through our system and actually pay for it in crypto. So that's really interesting. And it's a really new thing that didn't exist until yesterday.
Great. I'll put the link, if you like, I'll put the link in the description also. So guys, go ahead and check it out, Radom Network. Alexandra, thank you so much indeed. Really appreciate that. You've been very helpful, and I've enjoyed listening to you. Hopefully we'll see you again at some point.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. Thank you for listening.
Thanks a lot.